Happy holidays. This is Mark Rivera with Genre Online Net, and I am giving a off-the-cuff review of Jazware's Star Wars Micro Action Squadron Boba Fett Ship Launch Edition. I've already taken out of the box, so I'm just going to show you the box as is. So this is the front of the box, launch edition. You could see it here at the bottom that this is number 21, I believe. This is the number in the set. These are not numbered in terms of, collectability. This is the side of the box. This is the top of the box. And here's the back of the box that shows you a blueprint, which quite honestly doesn't really look like a blueprint to me. It just looks like a picture of the ship. Paint, just like it doesn't really look like a blueprint. That's all I could say. Well, anyway, and the features, which I'll go over, as well as some other pieces that are out there. I have the Razor's Crest and the Millennium Falcon. You see a picture of the Razor's Crest right here. And since this has been released, they've released a ton of them. This is probably my favorite picture on the box. And of course, within the box itself, you have this diorama-like back. So if you want to use this as a diorama, you could. And the bottom is pretty much what you would expect it to be. One thing that is good to note is that Jazwares does have a phone number for problems. In case you have a problem, you see it right there. So you could freeze frame it and write it down just in case there's ever a problem. It says don't return it, give them a call. And I think that would be a good idea, because I did have some problems with this unit, which I'll go over. Anyway, let me get the unit out and we'll talk about it. Just a moment, please. This is the Slave One, or as it was formerly known. Now it's referred to as either Boba Fett ship by Disney Star Wars or Fire Spray class ship, which is correct in both cases. But when Star Wars was released, Boba Fett was a villain for The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. And I'm not even going to get into the book of Boba Fett, because this is not a TV review. This is a product review. But I'm just saying that I would prefer them using the correct name of the ship, Slave One, since George Lucas was a family man, believe it or not. And you could see that in the wholesome quality of the storytelling of the films that he did make in the Star Wars saga. So I don't see any problem with calling the ship Slave One. It's not an implication of anything bad other than the fact that it fits the character. And it's a cool name for a bad guy's spaceship. That said, the reason why I'm presenting it like this is that it's easier for me to basically go over the features and then close them, as opposed to open them and then have to, sometimes it could be hard to open up things if you're filming with one hand. And I did buy a tripod from Amazon, but ultimately it was a dud, so I returned it, and I haven't gotten a new one yet, but eventually I will. So for the time being, this review is being done handheld, although at least I'm a lot steadier than I usually am. Of course, this is a lot smaller of a product. Now, let's get in close, shall we? Inside here you have, I thought this was like a carbon freezing chamber at once. It does have some slight articulation, if you can see. There's some minor detailing, okay? And there is what appears to be a peg in the middle or with a little hook, if that makes any sense. Sorry, my fingers are so gigantic compared to this that they do block the view. I don't mean that to obstruct anything, but I can't help it either. Anyway, so you can see over there's something at the center that I believe Boba Fett's jetpack gets put on, and then basically it's movable. You know, it just depends how you want to keep it. Okay, now let's move this to the front. You have the this kind of loading dock, if you will, that comes down from Slave One, as well there is a door that opens up and gives you access of the inside of the ship. The way this comes out easily, and once the door is put up, it sticks to the top, no problem whatsoever. Now, I recommend that if you are going to pop open this door, I would do it from the inside. It's just easier. Just stick your finger, put a little tiny bit of pressure, and it'll just pop right open. This is easy enough to open once you know where it is. And this comes out easily. But otherwise, that's what I would recommend. So as noted earlier, there is something that keeps this lid from, closing back down. It's easy. Just use your fingernail or the very tip of your finger to unlock it from the top, and it comes down and it basically closes like this, and that compartment is closed. And then you have this thing that comes out. I don't know what to call it, but you just push that in and boom, it stays in place. Then on the inside, here's the it's movable both, all the way around. You got maybe 170 degrees of movement here, back and forth. Otherwise, in terms of the actual detail, it's pretty, okay, you can see the doorway into the cockpit, which doesn't open. You can see the doorway that I did have open, and you could see this rack that looks like, reminds me of the carbon freezing rack, but it's actually, I guess, where Boba Fett keeps his weapons, as you can see here, but nothing's been painted or anything like that. And that doesn't bother me too much because, I mean, for what you're paying and what you're getting, it's still a nice value. But what I do have a problem with, I'll show you in a moment. Anyway, so you take this and you bring it down like so. And now this whole part of the ship is sealed. The only thing that hasn't been sealed is the cockpit. And this is where I have a major problem with it. Now, as you see, the cockpit is just like the other pieces. You look on, it moves up and down according to, according to gravity, basically. When it's landed, the cockpit kind of comes down, and when it flies, it goes up, so that basically you have the control and you can have your two figures theoretically seated inside without any issue. And these wings also move back and forth when you have it in a landing position or a flying position. The problem that I have is this. These two figures that come with it, these micro figures of Boba Fett and Fenric Shand, are just simply so small. Even though I love the idea that everything is scaled perfectly to emulate what the scale would be, I guess, for the movies, as well as in general keeping continuity with all the sets. But in this particular piece, I put Boba Fett inside the cockpit, and for the life of me, it was almost impossible to get him seated there, even though you have these little leverage here, these like space where I guess you can keep his arms or his legs from flying. But 9 times out of 10, when I put him in there and I tried to, because I originally wanted to just show it with the figures already installed, Basically, it literally just fell off, and I had the hardest time getting the figure out of here. I mean, I wasn't that upset because I knew eventually it would come out. I mean, it wasn't lost. But at the same time, you know, I thought to myself, you know, there are two groups of people that are going to get this. There's the kids of a certain age that this is actually made for. And then there are the adult collectors that, for whatever reason, whether they have the room for a full-size replica of the Slave One, as I prefer to call it, and as it was originally known, and or maybe, you know, maybe they simply don't have the room. I mean, if you live in an apartment and you have a large collection, this type of size of something is actually more beneficial to you than having large stuff everywhere that you may not be able to house properly. So that's the kind of the beauty of this. But you should not have to have a micro figure that falls out and have no way of getting it out unless you basically shake it and hope that gravity will do the work for you. In the end, gravity did part of the work, but I still had to carefully reach my fingers, and I'm a 6'3" tall man. So look at, you know, I mean, all right, this is my pointing finger, but it's still large. You know, I'm a grown man, 6'3", and my fingers are rather large. So it was harder for me to get the piece out than, you know, than it might be for a younger person that's, you know, still growing, you know. And if you're buying this as an alternative, as a small replica, knick-knack, whatever you want to call it, you shouldn't have to worry about the figures falling out of the cockpit and then having to go through some trouble to get them out. And so my thing is that this back room should have had a connection to open up to this room here, so that if you do have a problem where one of these tiny figures falls off the chair and now it's behind the mechanism and you've got to shake it out, kind of, if you can't reach it or find something that you can tweeze them out, without that opening, it's very hard. Whereas if this door opened up, you could just open it up with your finger, and odds are if you turned it over like this, the figure would then come out and you would be able to get them out easily, and it would not be as much of a rigmarole. But as is, it's kind of a pain, and for that reason, I don't plan on displaying it with the micro figures in here, because I don't want to go through that trouble. You know, I like to have things be simple, and, you know, you shouldn't have to go through a lot. And this is made for kids too. I mean, I'm not going to tell you that this is not a toy. It is a toy. But at the same time, it's, look, if we were little kids, because odds are if you're watching this, you're probably an adult, although kids could watch this as well. Look at the size of these figures. These are made to be lost, okay? I mean, if I was a little kid, I guarantee you sooner or later, at least one of these things would be lost. And then you got to replace it. That's the reason why I showed the Jazware's number in the beginning of this look at the piece. Because, you know, one, I wanted to have a record of it before I threw the box out. And two, I figured you all who may or may not have held on to the box or copied down the phone number would want to have a copy of that phone number. So that's why, if you can, hopefully it's readable. I would, you know, if you don't have the box, take a screenshot of my showing you where the number is, etc., and just magnify it if it's still too small. And basically that way you'll have their number, because if there's a problem, they're supposed to fix it. Now, I don't know what the warranty is on this, but I just wanted to make that clear, okay? So I would have made, like I said, in here. So I'm try opening this again. Of course, you see, this is where having a tripod would be so much better, because obviously you could see even with one hand, this is not easy to open. And it shouldn't be this hard. You know, even if it's, I mean, you don't want it to be loose, but at the same time, you shouldn't have to futz around with it like 3 or 4 times. So getting to the point of this door should have actually opened. You could have moved this piece a little bit to the center so that there would be room and you could still open the door over here as I showed earlier. But this should have actually been the door that could pop open as well, so that, as I said before, if a figure falls and gets trapped in the cockpit and you can't get it out, you know that, okay, if I go like this, shake it a little bit, and it comes out. In fact, you could even close it first and then shake it with that door open, so that you don't have to worry about it bouncing out and losing it on the floor. At least then you can get the piece. And that's my main criticism of the ship, is that it's very easy for these pieces to fall back out. And, you know, it's a pain in the rear that it shouldn't be to get them out by yourself. And last but not least, to go like this with it runs the risk of, once again, it falling to the floor. And sometimes, you know, you have something bounce off the table or go onto the floor, and you might not be able to find it because these things are tiny. Now, I don't mind the fact that they're tiny. It's expected. But if you're going to make something this small, then make it easy enough so that if they come out of the cockpit, you can get them out safely without breaking the ship by trying to do something that you're not supposed to do, or without risking losing a piece by shaking it out like this and hoping that it'll either fall out or you can get your fat adult fingers to pull it out. You know, and when I say that's not an insult against anybody, I'm just saying that, remember, this is really for children. I mean, adult collectors are getting this, but this is, you know, a child's hand is a lot smaller than an adult's hand. So maybe a child can reach in there and pull it out with his fingers, but an adult like myself, not so much. It's not easy. So that's one of my main criticisms. So, and that's the reason why I don't intend on putting these dolls in there, because when I put one in there, I had to go through all the trouble trying to take Boba Fett out. I said, screw it, I don't want to lose these pieces. I'm just going to keep them in here and just have the ship be what it is, which is a tiny toy replica of the Slave One, aka Boba Fett's ship, aka fire spray class ship. Okay, now that aside, let me just move this like this. Gravity does the work in terms of making the wings come down, and of course, as that happens, the cockpit goes into the proper position. Now in the back of the ship, you can see it's nicely detailed with, again, that same plastic, but it appears to have been painted. And I like the fact that the engines and this gear over here in the back has also been painted slightly darker to give it a little bit extra definition. It would be nice to have more detail, but then again, like I said, this is a toy, so you know you are going to get those screws and things like that that are in there. You could paint the detail yourself if you're so inclined, but if you're not a good painter, if you're not detail oriented, and you don't have the right type of tools to paint something like this to make it look more screen accurate and take advantage of the molding that they have, you're not really going to, you're not really going to actually help it. You're going to hurt it. So in this particular case, since I don't even have any paint, and since I don't consider myself skilled enough to do the type of intricate paint work that would be required, you have to be happy with it as it is. And again, I don't mind this, but if I was a kid or even a super collector, and I was obsessed with getting things to be 100% accurate, even though it's a toy, I would probably want to paint this or get somebody to paint it for me. I mean, you could have, another thing too is they could have put some sort of highlight in the engines, that not a light, just like using a paint that's a little bit lighter, put it around the edges so that when the ship moves and the light hits it, it's almost like having the fire coming out of the engines, you know? That would have been a nice touch. Hasbro did that with their 3 3/4 inch scale N1 fighter, and it's just the paint job on the back of the engines. But if you look at my review of that, you'll see that the back of those engines, you know, gives the illusion when you have light on it that it's actually, you know, a blue flame, or just, you know, the power of the engines, you know, going and enabling the ship to fly through space and whatnot. Here, you just have what it is, and there is no illusion of that. And while I'm glad actually that it doesn't have any light up features, because quite honestly, I don't like leaving batteries in things sometimes, because it's easy to forget and replace the batteries, and then battery acid gets in and can inevitably ruin it for you anyway. So I'm grateful that this is just something that works mainly with gravity and moving pieces, but at the same time, I would have definitely done something to give us that illusion, and I don't think that's too much of a hardship to ask for. Finally, in the back, let me just put this down for a moment. This opens up here, and it doesn't come out, but you have the little seismic bombs that we see in Attack of the Clones that Fett uses to try and wipe out people following, like in Attack of the Clones, it was Obi-Wan Kenobi. I think he may use them again in one of the Disney series. I just don't remember exactly, because I'm not a person. I'm more interested in the movies than I am the television shows. Although sometimes I like the TV shows and other times I don't. It just depends on how they do it and the quality of the writing, etc. But here's basically it. I mean, there's no real, I mean, it's detailed, but there's nothing to really make it stand out. So, and at least this closes, and you know, so you can close it and open it, and you don't have to worry about gravity or anything like that, or it getting loose. It seems to hold together fine, you know, just fine. As far as the rest of the ship, these things appear to move independently. I got the impression from looking at the box that they both would turn. If one turns, that they both would turn at the same time. But since I'm not 100% sure if in any of the shows or films or just in the literature and that they make about these ships, you know, in the Lucas books, like, you know, blueprints or whatnot, I'm not sure if these things actually move independently of each other. So like whether you can get one firing down and one firing this way, I'm not sure how accurate that is. I always got the impression that they both, you know, were more or less equal and they shot in the same direction. But that's the way they made it, or at least that's the way mine came. So I'm assuming, not that it's screen accurate, but that's what they intended. Now, as for the rest of the ship, the paint job's okay. You know, like, I mean, at least they show you the, you know, scratchy, damaged look. But in terms of the overall quality of the paint job, it's better than everything else. In terms of like the insides are just one dull color, and you saw the back of the toy as well. But other than that, it really is just, you know, some mild paint, and I don't know, I think it could have been done better too, you know. That's just my take on it. I'll have some still pictures as well at the end of the review, just so you guys can get a sense of it. But as it is, this was given to me as a gift, so I didn't pay for it. And I have seen this on sale, unfortunately, for quite more money than I think it's worth. But they did have an Amazon sale, and hopefully the person who got this for me as a surprise gift got the sale price, because the normal retail price, I don't think this is worth it. I love the Millennium Falcon. I love the Razor's Crest. Those things are great. But the Slave One is one of those things that it could have been done better. And, you know, I don't care if the fact that I'm paying a little bit of money for it or something like that, just because I'm getting something small. I expect some quality in terms of the paint job and the accessories. And again, the cockpit should not, you know, have just been isolated from the rest of the ship, since obviously these figures are going to fall out of the chairs, and it's a real pain if, you know, like I said, if you're an adult and you have big fingers, it's a real pain to get them out. And then you also run the risk, if you try and use gravity and shake them out, that they're going to fall on the floor and bounce, and you can end up losing them, you know. So it would have been much better if there was a door that opened up. That way, if they fell out, you could keep this closed, go like this. They would have come into the other room, then put it down, open it up, and then you have access to the figures that you can safely get out without risking losing them by shaking it. And like I said, they bounce off the table, they bounce off whatever, they go on the floor, and if you lose it, that really sucks. So overall, it could have been a lot better. I feel disappointed in some of the ways that it came out, as I've already described, but at the same time, I'm glad they made it. I know there's another version of it that's I guess a newer paint job, but you know, I prefer Slave One the way I prefer Boba Fett, you know, before, where I don't want him in clean armor. I liked it when his armor was all banged up and scratched and whatever. In some ways, the one mistake I think Star Wars has made as of late, they did this with Darth Maul and they did this with Boba Fett, is that these characters were more interesting when you didn't see them very much on the screen. I mean, Darth Maul was the Boba Fett of the prequel trilogy in the sense that he was the most interesting villain. You only got to know him. He's only maybe in, I don't even know if he's in 10 minutes of The Phantom Menace or not. But what we get of him is so memorable. In the same way in The Empire Strikes Back, what we get of Boba Fett, just that little bit, made him unforgettable. Him trying to shoot Luke, him talking to Darth Vader, that whole thing, escaping. And even in Return of the Jedi, his brief bit before he falls into the Sarlacc pit, spoilers, sorry about that, but, you know, before all that happens, you know, if you haven't noticed, like, in characters in Star Wars, they're not necessarily meant to be on screen, and you're not necessarily meant to know them for great periods of time. Sometimes they're just little cutaway images, and other times they are characters that are important, but it's not their story, so it's appropriate that you only see them for the part that involves them. And in the case of Boba Fett and Darth Maul, they've been overused. As much as some of the mythology that's now behind the fall of Mandalore and, you know, the retcon somewhat backstory to Darth Maul as far as, you know, what happened to him. There's elements that I really do like, but, you know, if they just left those things alone and went for something else, I think it would have been better. That's just my opinion. I think when you overexpose something too much, it loses its mystique, and those characters are what are helped maintain the mystique of what Star Wars was all about when they were released, respectively, you know, in 1985 originally for The Empire Strikes Back, and in 1999 for The Phantom Menace. Anyway, that's all I have for today. It's just a quick review, or maybe not so quick, depending on how much you choose to keep tuning in. But this is my last collectible for 2023. So I want to thank you all for watching my reviews of collectibles. I mean, I'm not nearly the collector that I used to be in terms of the fact that, well, you know, the high-end statues that I used to collect have become even more higher end as far as prices. And I also just don't have the room. I live in an apartment, and, you know, after a while you have to really decide, gee, what is it really worth my money? Do I have the space? And this is also very important. You know, if you're an adult and you living in an apartment and you want to date somebody and they're not a Star Wars fan, you know, you don't want your girlfriend thinking you're a giant man-child. You know what I mean? And you could tell me, oh, my wife already says that I'm a man-child and she's this, that, and the other. That's great for you. You're lucky. But for the average person, you know, not all girls are into Star Wars. And so inevitably, if you live in a small place and let's say you two live together and she puts her stuff in your house, guess what? You're going to have to put some of this stuff in storage, because if you live in a small apartment, you know, let's face it, you have to make room for her stuff. That's what's important about relationships, that give or take. So, you know, that's just something that I just wanted to mention, because, you know, collecting can become, it's a great hobby, but with high-end things, it gets super expensive. And to give you an idea of how much these things cost compared to what you can get back in 1980 or 81, the Jazware's Micro Action Squadron AT-AT, or All-Terrain Armored Transport, cost over $50. When the original AT-AT was revealed and sold at my local department store back in 1980, it was $50. $50, and you got that big, beautiful toy with the electronics and everything, and you could, you know, do whatever you wanted to it. It was built like a tank for a toy, and it only cost you $50. Now, I don't know what the build quality on the AT-AT is, but the fact that it's over $50 kind of is a bummer, because, you know, I know they put a lot of work into it, but hey, come on. You know, I'm not saying I'll never get it, but what I am saying is that that's the inflation that's occurred. And I know that they have to make a profit. They're entitled to it. But quite honestly, you know, you know, part of the selling point of this should be, this is not even die-cast metal, it's all plastic. So, and even the die-cast metal ones are not expensive compared to the Jazware ones, will cost you more than a die-cast metal smaller replica. So again, you know, I think these things could be cheaper, and I definitely think, even though I don't own it, the AT-AT is, I think it's ironic that even though it's been about over 40 years since The Empire Strikes Back came out, it is kind of ironic that that the AT-AT for the Battle of Hoth cost more money in a Micro Action Squadron form than it did to get the full 3 3/4 inch scaled giant behemoth toy that at the time, back in the early 1980s, was probably the most expensive Star Wars toy Kenner ever sold. Anyway, I'm done for now. Just going to take some still shots so you can see what it looks like better. I really appreciate you all watching, and I have some other videos that are coming soon. They're not product reviews, they're other things. I only do the product reviews occasionally when I get something that I think is interesting to share. And since this was a gift from somebody, I definitely wanted to share it with all of you. So thank you all for watching. I hope you like, comment, and subscribe, because it really helps me out. And I'll see you, whatever the video might be, in the next one. Thanks again, and Happy New Year. Bye-bye now.